This is going to be a spoiler-free review of R.A. Salvatore's The Crystal Shard. This is the first book in his Icewind Dale trilogy. It's a fun little story in a much larger series, and it has a very important place in D&D lore, but we'll get to that later. So what's this story about? Icewind Dale is a cold, unforgiving land. It's located north of the spine of the world where few dare travel. There's a small collection of settlements called 10 towns that form a loose confederation when needed. Fishermen bicker and battle over a great catch, as the ivory from the bone-headed trout will fetch a great price in the south. Barbarian tribes roam the icy plains, tracking packs of reindeer. Goblins, orcs, and ice giants dwell in the mountains and dark places of the tundra. The dwarves work their mines, forge weapons of great value, and trade their wares to the people of 10 towns. Dris Duorden, a dark elf, is not accepted by most. After leaving his subterranean homeland, he's found a new home in Icewind Dale. He's dug out a comfortable life for himself, and has even found a few friends. A halfling on the run named Regis, and a proud dwarf named Brunner. But an ancient evil has been unearthed in Icewind Dale, a dark magical artifact that threatens to kill the people of 10 towns. The Crystal Shard. The Crystal Shard's a fun story, and that's my main opinion of the book. I do have some criticisms, but that's mostly with the writing style. The actual plot, world building, and characters are all solid. This is an immersive story. Icewind Dale and 10 Towns are both familiar and foreign. It's not a prototypical fantasy setting, but it's not wholly unique. Icy fantasy settings aren't the standard, but they've been becoming more common of late. And we do get backstory about other faraway lands that seem extraordinarily foreign to the reader, especially the main character's homeland. But we do get a pretty fleshed out setting. We follow a small cast of POV characters. Their backstories are interesting and well lived in, especially Drist. And we get a good balance between them, especially in the beginning. He does lean on certain characters towards the middle of the book, but it comes back around towards the end. The novel begins with a frame story, which I really liked. It's a short little scenario that sets up the mood and overall theme of the novel. It was great. It's a great little look at 10 Towns. We get to see their knucklehead fish economy. That's not a made-up thing. They fish for knucklehead fish because their bones are like ivory. We get to see the kind of people who go to this barren place, the kind of outcasts and rogues who would go there. And we even get a glimpse into their political structure. I'd say Salvatore's greatest strength in this book is setting and lore. He does a lot of world building in a very short amount of time. Well, let's talk about world building for a moment. Salvatore packs the book with exposition. It presses against being too much, but I found myself being engrossed in it, especially Drist's stuff. This is where the rubber is going to meet the road for some readers. This is definitely going to feel like an 80s pulp fantasy to some readers, but all of the action moments and big climaxes are very well earned. This is an action-packed novel. I liked most of the action in this book. There's one section in the middle I felt dragged on a little too much. This leads to my one major criticism of the book. The action can get overly drawn out. He swiped his sword at an upward blow. The beast, foreseeing this move, effortlessly dodged before returning a hasty claw. He narrowly avoided the savage attack before returning a pointed blow towards the beast's midsection. That kind of thing. That's not word for word from the book, but that kind of writing. And that's fine in small doses. There's a few sections I feel like I get it. But the battles do get better in the later parts of the novel. And I like the ending overall. I feel like it does wrap up a little tight, but pretty satisfactory. It made me want the next book. To synthesize an overall opinion: great plot, great characters, an overall well fleshed out setting. But the writing leaves a little bit to be desired. Mostly the action, the prose are passable. But there's another part to this novel that really interests me. And this might either really entice or deter readers. This is a Forgotten Realms book. Some of you will know what that means, and you'll know what that means for the overall lore. Others might not. The Forgotten Realms is a D&D setting, and I don't just mean it's like a map. It's a fully fleshed out world with settings, characters, history, races, that kind of thing. It was created by Ed Greenwood. I think it was published in 1987, but it was like his childhood D&D setting. It's like his baby. That's kind of cool. And there's a ton of D&D settings that are far different and have their own histories. I'd say the Forgotten Realms is probably the most played now. That's probably because it's the most supported in the current edition of Dungeons and Dragons. It's also kind of like a kitchen sink type of world where you can be and do most things you want. And this setting also has the most novels by like a lot. I mean, The Crystal Shard was the second novel published in this universe, following 1987's Darkwater on Moonshae. But the Icewind Dale trilogy kind of got wrapped into the overall Drizzt series, which is a large, as of now, 36 book ongoing series. After finishing the initial Icewind Dale trilogy, Salvatore went on to write a prequel trilogy, and eventually the reading order was changed. I don't like when companies or authors do this. I know some readers read the prequels first. Obviously I didn't, but The Legend of Drizzt 1 Homeland is the recommended starting point for this series. But taking all that together, the entire world of Drizzt can seem daunting to some readers, especially completionist readers. It might also be unhealthy for some of them. It's 36 books. You can probably track down all the Drizzt books. A lot of these are really cheap on Abe Books. Some of the expanded universe stuff for the Forgotten Realms in its entirety is going to be really hard to track down. And the expanded Forgotten Realms universe of novels dwarfs all other series. Most of them are fairly short books, but there's so many of them. It's a complicated web of content going back to the late 80s. There's also a stigma about adapted works and novelizations. Some of that is cynicism, but let's be honest, most books adapted from other properties aren't always the best. I would say they're usually not the best. I can't speak for other Forgotten Realms books, but Salvatore put a lot of love and effort into this. There's a reason people still read it. And considering all of this lore and backstory and D&D stuff, this book was really easy to get into. And it got me kind of interested in some of the D&D lore and expanded universe stuff. I'll definitely finish the Icewind Dale trilogy. I don't know about the whole Drizzt series. But yeah, The Crystal Shard, it's a fine start to a much larger series. If you can separate this from the rest of the Forgotten Realms, this is a fun, easy read. Good characters, interesting premise, immersive setting. My main criticism is some of the action writing. You can also find a copy for relatively cheap. The Crystal Shard, did you like it? Did you love it? Did you hate it? If you've read other Forgotten Realms books, I'd be interested to know if any of them are any good. This really did get me interested in looking up other books from other settings. Obviously had to caught me a little secondhand Dark Sun book. I'm John. Thank you so much for indulging me in this review.